We've all been horrified, outraged by the news of an innocent man in Maryland. His name is Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was abducted by ICE and shipped to the Secot prison in El Salvador. Kilmar was granted asylum in the United States, and a judge issued a protective order that he could not be removed to El Salvador back in 2019. And yet ICE illegally abducted him from his home where he lives with his wife, an American citizen, and his disabled child, and they shipped him off to that prison in El Salvador, the one known for its extreme brutality and human rights violations. There was an order of protection in place for 6 years stating that he not be removed to El Salvador, and yet ICE did it anyway, and they knew he was innocent. They called it a clerical error. They admitted to a judge, we know he's not in a gang. We know we should not have taken him. We know he's innocent of any crimes. And then they told the judge, but we can't get him back because we don't have jurisdiction in El Salvador. We are paying the government of El Salvador to imprison these men. We have a contract with them. We are funneling American taxpayer dollars to that country so that they can keep these men in prison in a concentration camp. But we don't have any ability to get an innocent man back, and we know he's innocent. Well, just a couple of hours ago, a judge said that Garcia must be returned to the United States. I'm reading from the Huffington Post. Hyattsville, Maryland, a federal judge on Friday ordered the Trump administration to arrange for the return of a Maryland man to the United States after he was mistakenly deported to a notorious El Salvador prison. So I'm going to disagree with the HuffPost's wording of this next sentence, but let me read it to you and then explain why I disagree with it. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement expelled Kilmar Abrego Garcia last month despite an immigration judge's 2019 ruling that shielded him from deportation to his native El Salvador, where he would likely face persecution by local gangs. He was not expelled back to El Salvador. He was kidnapped from his home, put on a plane, and sent to a prison. He has been incarcerated, and he has done absolutely nothing wrong. Expelled is a terrible choice of verb here. Also, can we talk about the tremendous cruelty of the American government, knowing there was an order of protection against this man, knowing that if he went back to El Salvador, his life was at risk, and they were like, nah, we're going to send you anyway, even though we know you're innocent. The judge's ruling came shortly after Abrego Garcia's wife joined dozens of supporters at a rally to urge for her husband's immediate release. Jennifer Vasquez Sura, a U.S. citizen, hasn't spoken to Abrego Garcia since he was flown to his native El Salvador last month and in prison. That's because the men who are being kept prisoner there are not allowed to have any contact with their friends and family. They're not even allowed to read letters that are sent there by their friends and family. When I tell you that the conditions of this prison are cruel and inhumane, American prisons are bad enough, but Trump picked El Salvador specifically because he knew that the conditions there would be absolutely cruel and inhumane, and they could do things to the prisoners there that you can't do to folks in American prisons. And so they could play this card of like, we can't get him back. We don't have jurisdiction in El Salvador, even though we are paying the El Salvadoran government to keep him there. Kilmar's wife, Jennifer, urged her supporters to keep fighting for her husband and all the Kilmars out there whose stories are still waiting to be heard. That's right. We already know he is not the only innocent man down there. We actually don't have any proof so far from the government that any of these men are gang members. And even if they were still entitled to due process in the United States. All of the men down there have been denied their basic rights. They are victims of the Trump regime and of Marco Rubio. Okay, I'm going to read from the article a little bit more. To all the wives, mothers, children who also face this cruel separation, I stand with you in this bond of pain, she said during a rally at a community center in Hyattsville, Maryland. It's a journey that no one should ever have to suffer, a nightmare that feels endless. The campaign to reunite the couple will shift to a courtroom in Greenbelt, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. The White House has cast Kilmar Abrego Garcia, 29, as an MS-13 gang member and asserts that U.S. courts lack jurisdiction over the matter because the Salvadoran national is no longer in the U.S. They know he's not a gang member. In a sworn statement to the court, they said as much. They knew he was innocent. They called it a clerical error, and now they're trying to say he's an MS-13 gang member. In fact, Abrego Garcia's attorneys have countered that there is no evidence that he was an MS-13. The allegation is based on a confidential informant's claim in 2019 that Abrego Garcia was a member of a gang chapter in New York, a place he has never lived. So did the government drum up some anonymous letter where you can't trace it back to anybody? An anonymous informant claimed this guy was involved in a gang in New York State, a place he has never lived. They're saying that was their justification for deporting him. And then they're also at the same time saying, actually, we knew he was innocent. We knew that this was an error and we should not have sent him. Abrego Garcia's mistaken deportation, it's not really a deportation. He was kidnapped and sent to be incarcerated in a prison. He was not just deported back into, the general population in El Salvador. He was sent to a prison with no due process. This was described by the White House as an administrative error. It raised concerns about expelling non-citizens who have been granted permission to be in the United States. Again, not expelling. It's not that we just booted him out of the country. He was kidnapped, put on an airplane, and shipped to a prison where they are now saying he's lost and they can't get him back. This is an innocent man, and his life has been absolutely destroyed by the Trump regime. Abrego Garcia had a permit from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to work in the United States. His attorney, Simon Sandoval Moshenberg, said he served as a sheet metal apprentice and was pursuing a journeyman's license. He fled El Salvador in 2011, where he and his family were facing threats by local gangs. In 2019, a U.S. immigration judge granted him protection from deportation to El Salvador because he was likely to face gang persecution. He was released, and ICE did not appeal the decision, and they did not try to deport him to another country at that time. Abrego Garcia later married Vasquez Sora. The couple are parents to their son and her 2 children from a previous relationship. If I had all the money in the world, I would spend it all just to buy one thing, a phone call to hear Kilmar's voice again, Vasquez Sora says. Kilmar, if you can hear me, I miss you so much. I'm doing the best to fight for you and our children. So we'll see what comes next. A federal judge has said he must be returned to the United States. Again, we consistently have the courts ruling on the side of the Constitution, ruling on the side of due process, upholding the law. And this regime knowingly flaunting the rule of law, knowingly causing harm, suffering, violating people's rights, incarcerating, harming innocent people. They don't want Abrego Garcia returned to the United States for a couple of reasons, because they want to be able to ship American citizens there and disappear them. They want to disappear anybody they think is a political dissident, anybody who speaks out against Trump, and then say, you're just lost down there. You're there forever. We can't get you back. The threat of that is meant to make us comply in advance. And then they also hope to lose people to that concentration camp in El Salvador. I don't use that term lightly. Again, Google pictures of what it looks like inside. The second reason that they don't want Abrego Garcia to come back is because then he can be interviewed on the news. People can hear his story. They can find out the injustices that were done against him by the Trump regime and what life is like inside that prison. They do not want him interviewed. They do not want his testimony out there. They don't want anybody to come back from that prison and tell America and the world what Trump and Marco Rubio are doing. So I expect them to fight this, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.